One of the most difficult parts about writing is figuring out how to write. So you just finished looking at a few different TED Talks or commentaries and studying the techniques. So we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that. First, I'm going to help remind you about what you learned about analysis maybe in 6th and 7th grade. Okay, so you may have seen this chart before. How do we get our readers to follow our argument? And sentence stems may have been a helpful tool for us before. This shows because, or this means. We examined importance and implications. This is important, or if this, then this will happen, right? You may have seen other sentence stems, right? And these are different ways to summarize and connect our evidence to our claim and also elaborate a little bit on it. You're going to explain that connection that's there. As 8th graders in commentary, we're going to get more sophisticated. So let's look at some of the examples that our TED Talk speakers used in their commentaries. So one of the ways that we can get after analysis is cause and effect or problem solution. And we learned about those text structures before. I'm going to take you over to Megan Ramsey's TED Talk transcript, which is linked below the slide if you want to see that. But let's look at how she points out that cause-effect relationship within an issue. Okay, so this is from about the 2-minute mark in her piece. And this is a technique that we're going to talk about a little bit later, but you can see that she starts this cause effect with a rhetorical question, right? What's leading teenagers to be so concerned about their appearance? Okay, and then here is her cause and effect, right? So reason number 1, teenagers are rarely alone. And she doesn't just leave it at that. She's going to elaborate, right? So they're online all the time and it never ends. They're connected continuously and instantaneously. Okay, here's another reason. There's simply no privacy, and the social pressures that go along with that are relentless. Okay, so here's the effect. So now being always on is training our kids to value themselves. Okay, and it's based on the number of likes they get, right? So how we view importance is changed. Here's another effect. There's no separation between online and offline. So she's talking through this issue, that cause effect, or you can think about problem solution in other commentaries as a structure that can help you go deeper into uncovering what this issue is. Okay, so another type of analysis, which we hinted at with the rats, are implications. So what are the implications of this, and why is this worth considering for a larger audience? So we're going to go back to Megan's discussion around the 4-minute mark. So in this paragraph about implications, we see Megan Ramsey introduce again with another rhetorical question. What's the problem with all of this? And then you can see she unpacks the problems, and she's got layers and layers of this. Okay, so as an author, she says, all right, here in this image-obsessed culture, we're training our kids to spend more time on their appearance at the expense of all the other aspects. And then she's going to go back to research and find some data and some examples to back her up. Okay, so 6 out of 10 girls don't do something because they don't think they look good enough. Okay, and then again, you're going to see her dig deeper. So she's adding sentences that are her own thinking. These aren't trivial. These are fundamental, right? Then she goes back and she layers in. Okay, we see kids withdrawing from classroom debate. Okay, so why is that important? Okay, why should I care? And she's going to spend a few sentences where she's going to tell you why they don't engage, and then what happens when students don't engage. Okay, so throughout all of this, what you see her doing is using some evidence to unpack the problem, but she's got her own thinking about why this is detrimental. Okay, and then she sums it up with that statement, low body confidence is undermining academic achievement. Okay, and she could have put that at the beginning and left it at that, but instead what she did was analyze, here's how you know that, so that the reader or the listener is nodding their head along with her. Okay, so I'm going to skip to this last one so that we can stay with Megan Ramsey's example. Another way that you can analyze and commentary is to evaluate validity. So pointing out bias or prejudice or misconceptions, and then you're going to offer the more reasonable or accurate interpretation. So Megan Ramsey does this around the 7-minute mark as she's evaluating programs. Okay, so she's evaluating programs. She says, we have to help teenagers develop strategies to overcome image-related pressures and build their self-esteem. So she's got her subclaim. And then she says, here's the good news. There's many programs that are available, but here's the bad news. Most of them don't work. We've got to make sure that they work. And so then you see her say, here's the ones that work. Right? And she's going to point out you need these 6 things and talk about why each of those are important in order to help her reader understand what she's saying. So what we saw in Megan Ramsey's TED Talk was a lot of different type of analysis. And on the next slide, she really uses rhetorical questions to organize her thinking and lead her reader along. Let's take a look at another TED Talk by Kundo, right? And his approach is to challenge stereotypes. Okay, so as a reminder, Kundo is really talking about how important grit is, but also that it's not as simple as we think. Okay, so he gives this example of 2 stories, and he's already defined grit. And now, we can look at those stories, and he is helping the reader challenge the assumption like, oh, that was so simple. You just have to pull yourself up by the bootstraps, right? And he kind of says that here. And then here's his challenge. That's an incomplete picture, because what's more important are these factors in their lives that help influence their own agency, right? And then he's going to unpack and use those examples, some anecdotes, to show how it wasn't really just simple and it wasn't just those individuals by themselves. So it's another way to take what might be a simple idea and show how complex it is. Kundo also has a lot of examples of explanation and connection, which is really the level of analysis you worked on in 6th and 7th grade. So he's going to use definition and talking through examples and making those connections. So if you want to see that, go back and read his. But now we're going to go look at Nazario's example for some deconstruction and juxtaposition. Okay, so deconstruction is when authors take apart their evidence and they're going to elevate the most important parts, the key parts, and tell us what we should be thinking about this. Okay. So let's look at Nazario's paper around that. So Nazario is talking about his experience in prison and why that needs to change. And in around the 4-minute mark, you see him use that deconstruction to talk about COs. So he says, let me break it down for you basically. Some COs are going to feel this way, and so they act this way. And other COs are going to feel this way, and so they're going to act this way. And here's some of the implications of that. So that taking it apart and then elevating what's most important for the reader is going to help them follow your argument and or see the possibilities. I'm going to point out one other thing he does really well here is he uses rhetorical questions, and differently than Megan Ramsey did. So Megan Ramsey really used them to introduce ideas, to organize the flow of her ideas. Okay. Here, he's asking the reader to really reflect and kind of point out, like, why wouldn't we do this? Because it's pointing right at his theme. So he says, why wouldn't we mentor young people while they're in prison? Why not give them some ways and some reasons to change so that they can re-enter society and do something positive? And this right here is where his theme really is. Jails have to change so that we can get here. So instead of just asking rhetorical questions like, do you want to learn about this? I did, so here it is. He's asking that the reader to really reflect in order to get to his theme. So that's another way to use that technique. Okay, so one more technique which Nazario uses as well, which is juxtaposition. And when you juxtapose, you put two things right next to each other in order to highlight their differences. So it's a way to compare and contrast. And in this case, you're going to make one seem way more appealing. So in this example, Nazario is really talking about his own experience. So he spent 400 days in jail, almost 300 of that in solitary confinement. But here's where we find his juxtaposition, right? So he says, here's my experience, and it was not very good. I'm screaming, I'm pacing back and forth. But jails are actually supposed to rehabilitate a person, not cause him or her to become more angry, frustrated, and feel more hopeless. So by putting these two situations side by side, here's what jails are, or this is my jail experience versus what I want it to be or what it should be, you can see between those two choices, like, yeah, I want this choice. And then he can help lead to how to get to that choice. Okay, so we've talked about 4 different types of analysis and then 4 different techniques for analysis in your paper. What you're going to do now is go back to your own paper and make some changes. So I'd spend about 20 to 25 minutes on this. Any changes that you make, you want to make sure that you change that font color to red, and you may have to do that several times throughout. But 2 parts. 1, make sure that your analysis is like that layered cake. You have more analysis than you do evidence, but that it layers appropriately. And then try at least 2 new techniques or types of analysis. Push yourself if you want to do more than that in your commentary. But that's the kind of change that we're really looking for. Now, if you're feeling really stuck about analysis, one thing that you can do is begin to talk to somebody about your topic. So it can be somebody at home, my email or Mr. Auger's email's on there. If you want to reach out, we'll get on Google Meet or Zoom with you and talk about your topic and why it's important and what you hope for and why you're picking this and how this message applies to bigger people. Pay attention to the kinds of information that people want to know, because that's going to help clarify what it is you're trying to say about this topic and why it appeals to a larger audience. Okay, so really make sure that you're clear on your universal theme and you're staying focused on that throughout. Thanks for your attention. I know that was a little bit longer than I usually aim for. Really appreciate it. Good luck on your paper. Reach out if you need help.